What we do have a problem with, one, that the Democrats wrote a bill that's unconstitutional. Democrats promised us if you like your health care, you could keep it. We found that not to be true. We saw premiums have now risen when they said they would go down.
Obamacare has been an absolute disaster. If we win on Obamacare, it will be terminated in the court, and we'll see what happens.
Welcome back to Harvard. Close your eyes and you would think we were back in 2010, 9 years ago, when Republicans were actually winning on the health care issue. But since then, the public's backing of the Affordable Care Act has grown significantly, with now a majority now supporting Obamacare. It's a fact. Republicans in Congress have voted close to 70 times, however, to try to repeal it. And now Donald Trump wants to give it another, well, he wants to get rid of it again. He's going for the kill shot, this time in the courts. Not all Republicans are pleased with this big development. One Republican senator told Politico, we need a plan. And right now we don't have one. I'm not going to just throw this out to the whims of our creativity. Another person close to the president told Politico, Trump knows that he made a mistake, but he's dug in now. Vice President Mike Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short, told Katie Tur of this network that a plan was in the works.
What is the plan that the White House will have to replace it and not so that 20 million Americans are not suddenly without health insurance?
You should rest assured that 20 million Americans will certainly not be without health insurance. There's going to be plenty of time for us to come forward with more detail, and I think you'll see the Health and Human Services Secretary do that in the coming months.
Well, that's a promise President Trump has made again and again. Let's watch.
We're going to take care of everybody, but we're going to end up with a great plan that costs much less money for the people and much less money for the country.
We will have health care. It's going to happen. As soon as we get the taxes, we work on the health care, we're going to happen. We're coming closer, closer. I think now we have a plan that's going to be great. We are coming out with so many health care plans that are so much better than anything you've ever seen before.
And if the Supreme Court rules that Obamacare is out, we will have a plan that's far better than Obamacare.
For more, I'm joined by former Senator Claire McCaskill, Missouri, Democrat from Missouri, and former U.S. Congressman Carlos Curbelo, Republican from Florida. So a couple of questions, but the big one up front, Senator, is how do you have protections for people with pre-existing conditions, diabetes, et cetera, and they can get health care at a reasonable price when you don't have a plan?
Well, you said it, Chris. They've got nothing. I think the biggest fraud and hoax of the last decade in American politics was the notion that the Republican Party had a way to bring down health care costs and also keep insurance companies off the back of the American people by protecting pre-existing conditions. They have said repeal and replace for a decade. They have never had a replace plan that did any of the things they've promised. And I'll tell you what's really interesting to watch. President Trump has now dumped this on Mitch McConnell's lap. And it's like that game Hot Potato. You know, everybody's trying to throw the potato around, and they're trying to throw it back to the White House. So I think it's important for the Democrats in Congress to say every day, where is the president's health care plan? Because you know what? They do not have one that will work for the American people.
Congressman, what does the Republican Party do if the courts do, if the Supreme Court does, it's a Republican Supreme Court basically, if now without the tax in it, without the sanction if you don't pay into it, what happens if they do strike it down as unconstitutional? Isn't your party, the Republican Party, stuck empty-handed with nothing for the people, 20 million people?
In that case, the only path forward, Chris, would be a bipartisan compromise on health care. And in the 115th Congress, there were Republicans and Democrats in the Senate trying to craft an agreement. But that's the only potential plan. I can assure you that congressional Republicans are not excited by this last statement by the president on health care. I remind you that the president just a couple years ago had a big celebration at the White House when the House did pass a repeal and replace measure, only to call it a mean bill a couple weeks later. So I don't think there's a lot of trust between congressional Republicans and the White House, and I can assure you that no one is excited about this latest escapade.
You know, Senator, back in the 30s, I heard a tape of it of FDR, the great Democratic president. He once said, the Republicans always say, we're going to do everything the Democrats do, and it's not going to cost you a nickel. It was great. And now they are saying, we're going to give you health care for existing condition, coverage for your kids up to the age 26, without a nickel, without even a program. It's the Music Man.
Yeah, the sad thing about this is almost from day one, when you do a big change in the healthcare system, like we did with the ACA, there were things that needed to be fixed and tweaked. But Mitch McConnell knew he had a political 2x4. And he, as usual, all he cares about is getting Republicans elected, not the underlying policy. So, you know, he didn't want to work with us to fix some of the things that can be and still could be fixed in the ACA because they were so determined to make Obamacare the bad guy. Well, and here's the other thing that really irritates me about what's being said today. They say, well, there's no hurry here. That shows you how out of touch they are. There are millions of Americans that will go to bed tonight worried because of what's being said in Washington about health care. People that are worried that there'll be caps on their policies again. People that are worried that their children who are getting ready to go off their policies aren't going to find a place they can get the affordable insurance that they can get now under the ACA. Worried that they aren't going to be able to get covered because they've been sick before. If they are going to, in fact, put something else in place, they owe it to the American people to do it tomorrow, not to play around with this politically and pretend that they've got a plan when they're not willing to show it to the people.
You know, Carlos, it seems to me we've watched politics for years, and one thing that's been pretty static is that women voters tend to care about health care more than men. They're more astute about it generally because they generally in the household worry more about it. Just a fact they're the caretakers, they're the stewards of health care in the family. They watch what insurance covers and what it doesn't cover. Men are sort of somewhat oblivious sometimes to what's going on. This is a fact. And you keep losing elections, Republicans, because the women swamp you in the numbers. Doesn't the Republican caucus, led by smart people like McCarthy and sometimes Mitch, understand you're giving up the majority voter, which is the woman, on this issue? It's a killer issue, health care.
Well, just look at the 2018 elections, Chris. Democrats used health care. It was the most prominent issue in all their ads, and that delivered them a 40-seat win in the U.S. House of Representatives. And it was a lot of suburban women that did abandon Republicans. Now, the Republican Party has delivered on health care in the past. I remind everyone that it's thanks to congressional Republicans and the Bush administration that seniors in this country have a prescription drug benefit. The difference between then and now is that the Bush administration and the congressional leaders of the time had a plan. They tried to approach Democrats. They worked with some Democrats. There is no plan today. There wasn't a plan in the 115th Congress, the last Congress, when Republicans started the effort to repeal and replace the ACA. So that's the big difference. There's no plan. So for now, this is just a gift to congressional Democrats because Republicans were already clobbered in the 2018 election because of the health care issue.
Well said. Anyway, on his way to Michigan tonight, President Trump announced he would reverse his administration's proposal to kill money for the Special Olympics. Let's watch this switcheroo.
The Special Olympics will be funded. I heard about it this morning. I have overridden my people. We're funding the Special Olympics.
Claire McCaskill, I think the president heard the public's reaction to killing the program that benefits so many, especially young Americans who have challenges.
Yeah, if he just heard about it this morning, you know, that's a head scratcher, right? Because this has been out there for certainly a couple of days now. And I really think the other thing that's interesting about this is he's not reversing anything. You know, they have submitted a budget to Congress, and Congress is going to ignore the cuts to Special Olympics. They were never, I mean, my former colleague Roy Blunt, a Republican from Missouri, who's the head of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate that will determine this, said yesterday there's no way he was going to cut funding for Special Olympics. So this is a congressional decision. The president doesn't have the power to do this. But once again, he wants to make it look like that it's all about him, even when it's about a whole lot of young people who have a special opportunity through the Special Olympics that should be supported by every level of government.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.